It's good cat. Oh yeah. Puss boy just finished the assignment, feeling good, being a productive day, studying, did the test, came home, haven't played League. I don't have time to play League, so I'm study. Life's good, boys. Your boy is focused. He's a man of focus, commitment, and absolute sheer will. Memes. I want to show a study you have beside your studies. Funny joke man. I am comedy man. Man.
And there are a lot of things that argue to be.
Hello, whoever tuned.
So, yes, of course, intelligence is a product of evolution, but people like to suggest that there's something fundamentally different separating us from the animals. Now, hopefully by this point, some of you might be thinking, well, what is intelligence? And that is a very important question to ask, because, of course, how we measure it, how we define it, is going to essentially question which is the most intelligent animal. So if we take the Clark's nutcracker, which from early elementary can memorize the location of tens of thousands of pine nuts every year, and we compare, say, a human trying to remember the specific location of these books that are dumped in this room, if that was our measure of intelligence, the ability to recall specific locations of items, which would be the most intelligent animal in this context. I think you would have to say that the Clark's nutcracker would probably edge us out if we weren't allowed to rely on some technology that we invented. And that's not the only issue when we start thinking about intelligence. The other issue that arises is that complex behavior doesn't actually need to be intelligent. And this is something that Conrad Lorenz, one of these sort of founding father figures, but one we don't like very much because he was a Nazi, came up with the idea of the fixed patterns. So what's going on here, and this is actually an old video of him demonstrating a fixed action pattern in action, if you will. So here you have a goose, and you could say, well, the goose understands that that egg, if it's left outside the nest, will die, and so it's a goal-oriented action. She's doing her best to move it back into the nest to keep it warm. But in actual fact, that egg is just what we call a triggering stimulus, and you'll notice when it's taken away, she still completes the movements that she would have done anyway, as if she were still rolling that egg underneath her. And this is what we call a fixed action. Once it's triggered, she can't kind of interrupt and stop, even though the goal has been removed, getting the egg underneath her. So you can have behaviors which on the surface may look complex and that you could get a complex explanation to, which in actual fact might have quite simple explanation to the end of it. And another issue we have with intelligence is that behavior might appear to be based on human-like intelligence, but it's not. Has anyone ever heard the story of Clever Hans? Okay, a couple of you will bear with me because I'll tell it to the rest of the people in the room. So Clever Hans was a horse that could do mathematics. He would travel around fairs, and he would, using this board here, when his owner gave him sums, multiplication, subtraction, all the rest of it, division, and indicated on this board what he was meant to do, he would then stamp out the answer. And he was very good at this. He could get the answer to seemingly complex equations stamping on the board. And so he went through counting fairs and the rest of it as a fair attraction, basically. This horse that could do mathematics. How amazing. And Clever Hans was very clever, but he just wasn't clever in a way that everybody thought he was. He didn't understand what was on this board and didn't understand how to do a mathematical equation. But what he did understand was when he was getting close to the answer, he was very good at reading incredibly subtle human cues. Because, of course, the trainer or the person asking the question was counting along and knew when Clever Hans was getting close to the correct number of hoofbeats. And he could read that person and know when to stop stamping his hoof so that he landed on the correct answer. And the way they figured this out was they kind of tested him by putting someone behind the screen. Behind the screen. And of course, once he couldn't see the person who asked him the question, he didn't know what the answer was. So we might have behavior which on the surface of it looks like it's similar to human intelligence, looks to be very clever, and it might be, as it is in the case of clever Hans, but it could be an entirely different cognitive explanation underlying the behavior. So intelligence, as in the case of clever Hans, but it could be an entirely different cognitive explanation underlying the behavior. So intelligence, as it turns out, isn't actually a particularly useful concept for investigating mental lives of non-human animals, at least not intelligence in the way that we commonly understand it as humans. So what do we do instead? Well, one approach, and it's the approach
I love memes while studying.
the way that we commonly understand it as humans. So what do we do instead? Well, one approach, and it's the approach that I take, the way that we commonly.
So long as it's not too distracting, it makes studying easier.
We understand it as humans. So what do we do instead? Well, one approach, and it's the approach that I tend to use, is using an operational definition of something called cognition. And cognition refers to mechanisms by which an animal acquires, processes, and acts on information from the environment. Now, this is admittedly an incredibly broad definition, and it captures a lot of things. So there is, of course, because there's always a debate about pretty much everything in cognition, there's a debate about how we should define cognition, whether this is a good definition, but for the time being, it's the best we've got, so it's the one that we're going to go with. But of course, this is not straightforward, because
Isaac, what are you doing? Wait, Isaac. Isaac. Hey, what are you doing? Isaac. Playing with the string, love.
all of these things are happening inside the animal's mind, And so how we actually test something that we cannot directly observe ourselves. And this really, I guess, sets up a problem that I, in my third year of undergrad, pretty obsessed with, and that's why I ended up here now, essentially, is I really like the challenge of how we could use behavior, or try to use behavior, to test hypotheses about cognition. And in particular, because I happened to take a psychology class as an elective in third year, and the whole time they were just talking about all these uniquely human cognitive abilities, and you probably can tell by now, because I happened to take of how it became that we cannot directly observe ourselves. And this really, I guess, sets up a problem that I became when I was in my third year of undergrad pretty obsessed with, and that's why I ended up here now, essentially, is I really like the challenge of how we could use behavior, or try to use behavior, to test hypotheses about cognition. And in particular, because I happened to take a psychology class as an elective in third year, and the whole time they were just talking about all these uniquely human cognitive abilities, and you probably can tell by now I'm pretty obsessed with birds, so I was like, oh, what about the birds? And that really led me down the path of wanting to understand whether or not any other species share some of these uniquely human abilities. You might be sitting there wondering, what kind of thing do you mean? Of course, because there's always a debate about pretty much everything in animal cognition. There's a debate about how we should define cognition, whether this is a good definition, but for the time being, it's the best we've got, so it's the one that we're going to go with. But of course, this is not straightforward, because all of these things are happening inside the animal's mind, and so how do we actually test something that we cannot directly observe ourselves? And this really, I guess, sets up a problem that I became when I was in my third year of undergrad pretty obsessed with, and that's why I ended up here now, essentially, is I really like the challenge of how we could use behavior, or try to use behavior, to test hypotheses about cognition. And in particular, because I happened to take a psychology class as an elective in third year, and the whole time they were just talking about all these uniquely human cognitive abilities, and you probably can tell by now I'm pretty obsessed with birds, so I was like, oh, what about the birds? And that really led me down the path of wanting to understand whether or not any other species share some of these uniquely human abilities. You might be sitting there wondering, what kind of thing do you mean? Well, here is a not completely comprehensive, but a list of some of the things that can claim to be uniquely human. Tool use and tool manufacture, although there's increasing evidence that other species can do this, but it was Jane Goodall who was the first to suggest that we weren't the only tool using species. Mental time travel, this is the ability to imagine yourself in the future and reflect on the past. And it is about knowing the past in the sense that you can replay that just about like a video in your head, and you can replay or play a video in your head what you imagine the future to be. This ability is believed to be uniquely human. Syntactical grammatical language, consciousness, self-awareness, imitation, which we touched on very briefly as the basis of culture in the last lecture.
Another study cat arrives, but her spot is taken. Sorry, Audrey. I'd love to have you, but would you be okay cutting with Karate? You want to sleep on my bag? Audrey. Audrey. Audrey, come on, please. I don't know, bro. I'm on that new wave S. Like I'm next level right now. I'm like no YouTube, no Facebook, no Imgur, no Reddit. I am alpha virgin. I am chodote, super virgin. I need to go to the gym though. I'm getting skinny again. I'm always skinny, but you know, it'd be good to get back into the gym. But anyways, I don't know. I am chodote, super virgin. Anyway, I need to think. No, Aji, please, no, please. I love you.
So, we might have a behavior which on the surface of it looks like it's similar to human intelligence. Heavily criticized as it shouldn't be around the same time, the lecture, deception, and theory of mind. And it's theory of mind that I'm going to give you as a case study today for it.
Time travel. Oh, pardon me. Syntactical grammatical language. Consciousness. Self. awareness imitation game. Perception theory of mind. You're so cute. Hello. How you doing? Genesis, but oh God, you got a snot bubble. Oh no, are you okay? Oh. I got 2 cats. Why are you trying to bite me? I can't show you guys, but I got two cats. Oh my God, yes, 2 study cats. It's rare because my cats usually don't get along with each other. Can I sniff? Don't sniff too much. You know June's Kitchen? Like it's a YouTube channel where they cook with the cats. And he keeps showing like different foods to the cats for them to smell. They're curious cats and it's so cute.
Ways in which we can start to challenge ideas of human uniqueness. So what is theory of mind? It's the ability to perceive others' actions as governed by their internal states, which includes desires, beliefs, intention, and knowledge. So for example, you would explain someone else's behavior based off your understanding of their beliefs and their internal desires. So if you saw your flatmate on day heading to the fridge to grab themselves a cold drink, you would explain that behavior. You'd be able to impute what's going on inside your flatmate's mind. They're thirsty, they want a drink, it's hot, they know that we keep stuff in the fridge, but you might have had the last drink out of the fridge, so you actually also have an understanding that belief of theirs that there is a cold drink in the fridge is in fact false, and you're sitting there like, ooh, able to predict that they're going to be unhappy with you because you stole the last drink. It's these kinds of abilities to predict and explain the behavior of others based on their internal states that's believed to be uniquely human. The classic test for theory of mind is the false belief task, internal state.
Knowledge.
That's believed to be uniquely human. The classic test for theory of mind is the false belief task. Now this runs like this. Sally has a little basket and Anne has a box. And Sally's got this marble and she hides it in her basket and then she leaves. While she's gone, Anne takes the marble and places it into her box. Then Anne leaves. Sally returns and the person is asked, where will Sally look for her marble? So hands up if you think that Sally will look in the box for her marble. Hands up if you think she's going to look in the basket. Okay, yes. Cool. You've all got a theory of mind. So you pass this test and it's passed by 4-year-old humans. It tends to be failed. The verbal version of the test tends to be failed by children younger than 4, suggesting that theory of mind may emerge around the same time that a full syntactical grammatical language emerges. It's failed by people with autism, suggesting that perhaps some kind of theory of mind deficiency might be underpinning autism. But there's a bit of contention around that. Yep. Yeah, so failures tend to be either they think it's in the box or they don't actually understand the language of the frame. nicely preempted the next slide. So, because it's all based on language and there's a suggestion that it emerges around the same time as language, some people have said, well, it's not that young children don't understand false language, and there's a suggestion that it emerges actually understand. And the language or the phrasing. Nicely preempted the next slide. So, because it's all based on language and there's a suggestion that it emerges around the same time as language, some people have said, well, it's not that young children don't understand false belief, it's that they don't understand the phrasing of that false belief task. So what happens if you give them a non-verbal task? And so this is something that Victoria Southgate's lab has done. They've tested 2-year-old children and even children younger than this with these video playback sequences, and then looked at the looking time of the children. Where does the child look when the actor returns to search for the object? So in this one, there's a puppet. Sometimes the mouse isn't working, but if we look at C, you've got a puppet. The puppet hides the ball in the box, and then it moves it to the adjacent box, and then it kind of messes around a bit with the first box. The actor turns away. The puppet removes the ball from the scene. The actor turns back, and children tend to look in the last place that the actor saw the ball being placed. This is consistent with a false belief because, of course, the ball is no longer in there, but the children are anticipating that is where the actor will look. The actor will look in the last place that they saw the ball being put into. And it's the same in the false belief task too. You can see I've highlighted in red the last place that the actor saw the ball being placed, and again down the bottom highlighted in red is where the children tended to look when the actor turned back around to face the screen. And so 17 out of the 20 children looked at the correct first location, and they tended to look for longer at locations that were correct as well in this non-verbal version of false belief. Now, of course, I've already prefaced this, but there has been a debate since 1978 full version of false belief. First, see I've highlighted in red the last place that the actor saw the ball being placed, and again down the bottom highlighted in red is where the children tended to look. In red, the last place that the actor saw the ball being placed. Then again, the puppet hides the ball in the box, and then it moves it to the adjacent box, and then it kind of messes around a bit with the first box. The actor turns away. The puppet removes the ball from the scene. The actor turns back, and children tend to look in the last place that the actor saw the ball being placed. This is consistent with a false belief because, of course, the ball is no longer in there, but the children are anticipating that is where the actor will look. The actor will look in the last place that they saw the ball being put into. And it's the same in the false belief task too. You can see I've highlighted in red the last place that the actor saw the ball being placed, and again down the bottom highlighted in red is where the children tended to look when the actor turned back around to face the screen. And so 17 out of the 20 children looked at the correct first location, and they tended to look for longer at locations that were correct as well in this non-verbal version of false belief. Now, of course, I've already prefaced this, but there has been a debate since 1978 when Premack and Woodruff first asked the question, does a chimpanzee have a theory of mind? We then had a paper in 2007 from Ken and Pavanelli, who are like the villains of the story of the debate over theory of mind because they love to argue that no, they do not have a theory of mind. And Joseph Call and Michael Tomasello have been doing a lot of work in this space for more than 30 years now. So why do I say that Ken and Pavanelli are sort of the villains in the story? Well, it's because their initial attempts So why do I say that Ken and Pavanelli are sort of the villain? in the story when the actor turned back around to face the screen. And so 17 out of the 20 children looked at the correct first location, and they tended to look for longer at locations that were correct as well, in this non-verbal version of false belief. Now, of course, I've already prefaced this, but there has been a debate since 1978 when Premack and Woodruff first asked the question, does a chimpanzee have a theory of mind? We then had a paper in 2007 from Ken and Polinelli, who were like the villains of the story of the debate over theory of mind, because they love to argue that no, they do not have a theory of mind. And Joseph Hall and Michael Tomasello have been doing a lot of work in this space for more than 30 years now. So why do I say that Ken and Polinelli are sort of the villains in the story? Well, it's because their initial attempts to test with theory of mind in chimpanzees completely lacked what we call ecological validity. So they tried to argue that the chimpanzee didn't have a theory of mind because it didn't understand that someone wearing a bucket on their head wouldn't be able to see them and that they shouldn't beg for food. So they basically set up a whole lot of conditions like this, you see here, two people, and saw whether or not the chimpanzee would correctly beg at the person that could actually see them. So in A, you beg at the person holding the bucket on the shoulder instead of the person with the bucket on the head. In B, you beg at the person with the card to the side instead of the card in front of their face. C, obviously, with the blindfold around the mouth instead of over the eyes, facing toward them instead of facing away, eyes open instead of eyes closed. And so chimpanzees just begged at random, basically, toward all of these people. But bearing in mind, chimpanzees had neither themselves experienced with blindfold, experienced with bucket on the head, and probably were a bit confused as to what people were doing, what they were meant to do in the task. So these tasks were heavily criticized as lacking ecological validity. And so subsequently, people tried to design tests of theory of mind for chimpanzees that are more chimp-centric, that focus on things that are likely to be of interest to them. And in particular, most recently, someone has actually attempted to replicate that infant study with chimpanzees. So up in the corner here, you can see there's a chimp, and it is drinking juice from a tube, and that's to get it to stay and watch this video so that they can do some gaze tracking of where the chimp is looking. The red dots on the video represent the locations of the screen that the chimp is actually looking at whilst this video is playing. And effectively, they have someone dressed up in a monkey suit and kind of act as the Sally or the Anne, if you like, in this problem. Okay, so there's a familiarization phase where they just make sure that they can track where the animal's looking. So this is the grad student who was doing a PhD, dressed as a monkey. You see the chimpanzee is looking at the moment at the guy in green shirt. And then the chimpanzee briefly looks at the box where the stone is hidden, and then again is looking at where the stone is hidden. So this is just to check that they are watching it. And now we have a false belief. Oh no, it's still familiarization, sorry. This is again to check that they are going to look towards the correct location. See up in real time we have actually what the chimpanzee looks like while it's doing that, looking around the screen. And now we have the false belief. This adorable baby bonobo. Right, so the actor sees the rock being hidden, and here controlling for the fact that the monkey-suited actor is touching the box last, by touching the empty box, so that it's not just a case of the last box that was touched being also the false belief location. I come back in. And that's the evidence they take for whether or not the chimp understands false belief. We've got one more example here. So the guy in the green shirt has seen this box last. And we'll see whether or not those red dots appear here. Oh, so that is how the experiment was run with the chimps, the non-verbal version of the false belief task. And they also had quite a hilarious haystack hitting version of this as well, where the guy in the monkey suit ran into different haystacks, and then a guy comes out with a pole and starts whacking haystacks. It's quite confusing and doesn't really perfectly match up with the classic Sally Ann, so that's why I didn't show you guys that particular video. But here's the evidence that they put together to say that yes, the chimpanzees based off looking times do understand false belief. You can see that in both the different versions of false belief task, slightly different. One in which the last box that was touched by the chimpanzee actor also was the last location that the person had seen, and then there was another in which the last box touched was not the last location that the person in the green t-shirt had seen, so they're trying to control the various other explanations. And you can see that the mean number of first looks tended to be in the correct location, so where the guy in the red shirt should have looked if he'd been following his false belief. It does really bother me, again, that there aren't error bars on this graph, especially as this is published in Science. My goodness. Anyway, here on this side as well, you've got individual response rates in terms of whether or not that specific animal looked at the correct location or whether they looked at the wrong location, whether they didn't look at either box in the white here. And so taken together, they suggest that at least some, or whether they looked at individual response rates in terms of whether or not that specific animal looked at the correct location or whether they looked at the wrong location, whether they didn't look at either box in the white here. And so taken together, they suggest that at least some of these animals did understand false belief that the guy in the green shirt was going to look where he believed the rock was going to be hidden, even though the rock was no longer there. My question to you, have a think. Are you convinced by these tests that an ape can attribute a false belief? Have a chat with your neighbors for a couple of minutes, and then we're going to kind of do a vote, hands up, hands down, whether or not people think this is sufficient proof that a chimpanzee can attribute a false belief.
Hell no.
Okay,
Right? Like,
so
it's like some
context.
evidence. You need way more, but I'm leaning towards believing it, but I need more evidence, better things.
That this is insufficient evidence that great apes can understand false beliefs. Okay, and who thinks that this is sufficient evidence that great apes can understand false beliefs? Okay, and who is kind of doesn't really know? All right, what if I told you that nobody has been able to replicate the living time study with infants, despite the fact that there's been a lot of attempts to do so? That only Victoria Southgate's lab seems to be able to get these effects of non-verbal false belief. So, given that we can't replicate the false belief non-verbal task with human infants, those of you that were on the fence, who now has shifted toward thinking that maybe this is insufficient evidence for false belief? Yeah, I'm seeing a few nods. Yeah, so I mean, the debate basically rages on, and we are yet to find a test that is robust within a non-verbal test for false belief that is robust in humans. And so when I first saw this come out, I was like, awesome. And then about a month afterwards, I went to a workshop where I heard about all of these attempts that were completely unpublished because it's really hard to publish negative results of the non-verbal looking task, even done here in psychology. So then I was like, oh, that probably means people are going to have the same problem that ape study. So we probably need to keep looking for a good test of theory of mind. So we've been focused on the idea of false belief and on theory of mind and belief attribution up to now. But actually, theory of mind also incorporates the ability to understand that others have desires. And it's actually, and on, so we probably need to keep, I'm here in psychology a bit. So then I was like, oh, that probably means people are going to have the same problem that ape study. So we probably need to keep looking for a good test of theory of mind. So we've been focused on the idea of false belief and on theory of mind and belief attribution up to now. But actually, theory of mind also incorporates the ability to understand that others have desires. And it's actually thought that the understanding of desire in others emerges before the understanding of belief. So children actually are able to explain the behavior of others is driven by their desires, their hunger, thirst, etc., before they understand that others have beliefs about the world which might drive their desire. And later on, the development of theory of mind, these two things get integrated together. And so the question is, well, we've been asking kind of the hardest part of theory of mind in non-human animals so far. And so during my PhD, together with some people in my lab, some friends of mine, we just of theory of mind. Theory of mind is to first understand. So we've been focused on the idea of false belief and on theory of mind and belief attribution up to now. But actually, theory of mind also incorporates the ability to understand that others have desires. And it's actually
Are you okay?
Thought that the understanding of desire in others emerges before the understanding of belief. So children actually are able to explain the behavior of others is driven by their desires, say hunger, thirst, etc., before they understand that others have beliefs about the world which might drive. Are able to explain belief,
but
keep looking for a good test of theory of mind. So we've been focused on the idea of false belief and on theory of mind and belief attribution up to now. But actually, theory of mind also incorporates the ability to understand that others have desires. And it's actually thought that the understanding of desire in others emerges before the understanding of belief. So children.
Please not on the laptop, Ate. Please. I'm trying to study, buddy.
Even though the rock is no longer there. Okay, the looking time stuff. The duration J experiences with some people in others emerges before the for a good false belief and on theory of mind and belief attribution up to now. But actually, theory of mind also incorporates the ability to understand that others have desires. And it's actually thought that the understanding of desire in others emerges before the understanding of belief. So the idea of false belief and on theory of mind and belief attribution up to now. But actually, theory of mind also incorporates the ability to understand that others have desires. And it's actually thought that the understanding of desire in others emerges before the understanding of belief. So children actually are able to explain the behavior of others driven by their desires, their hunger, thirst, etc., before they understand that others have beliefs.